Hello there, this is Out Motorsports. My name is Jake, and this is the 2021 Audi SQ5 Sportback. The SQ5 is the hotted up, slightly more sporty version of Audi's very popular Q5 crossover, and Audi has added this Sportback body style to the Q5 family for 2021. The Sportback is similar to what a lot of other manufacturers are doing in that it's kind of this chop top rear end of the roof and the rear end of the vehicle to make the car look a little more coupe-esque and in theory a little more sporty. In my opinion, it really just serves to reinforce the fact that all of these crossovers are just tall hatchbacks and wagons in the first place. So yes, you lose a little bit of practicality at the rear of the car, but it ends up looking kind of like a tall hatchback, which it is. So with that, let's talk about what the 2021 SQ5 Sportback is, and then let's get on the road and see how it is to drive. Now, before we get too far into this, please take a second, subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Really appreciate the support there. And with that, let's talk about what's under the hood of this 2021 SQ5 Sportback. So popping the hood of the 2021 SQ5 Sportback, you will find the 3-liter turbocharged V6. Audi calls this the EA389, which none of you will care about, and it makes 349 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque. This is the only engine that will come in the SQ5 and SQ5 Sportback. Audi does also offer a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder and a plug-in hybrid drivetrain on the Q5 and Q5 Sportback. Those are not really as sporty of vehicles in Audi's ranking system hierarchy. However, they are both also options, so depending on your preference for power, torque, fuel economy, all that good stuff, those are your options. This is the only offering in the SQ5. And of course, we have to talk about getting the power out of the engine down to the ground, and that means we have to talk about the transmission and the drive wheels. So first up, every SQ5 and SQ5 Sportback come with a ZF 8-speed automatic transmission with a torque converter. That is a very standard, ubiquitous transmission among the industry at this point, but of course every manufacturer sets it up, tunes it, provides their own software, so they do all drive a little bit differently and respond a little bit differently to your inputs. So we'll see how Audi's version of it is here in just a minute. And then of course, from the transmission to the drive wheels, this SQ5 Sportback has Audi's Quattro all-wheel drive system. Now, the important thing to note here is that this SQ5 Sportback in particular has Audi's S Sport package, which is an option, and it gives you two things that you might care about if you really care about the act of driving. The first is an adaptive air suspension. So the vehicle raises and lowers based on the drive mode you've got selected, and it can also be lowered at the rear for some cargo loading while you're stopped. Now, that of course means it can also firm up and loosen up just a little bit for the sake of handling corners. The other more interesting thing when we're talking about corners though is the rear differential, which Audi kind of glosses over when they tell you online what the S Sport package is, but it is the Audi Sport differential, and it is an active torque vectoring rear diff. So it can send power left to right based on the driving that you are doing, and that helps make the car pivot and rotate, which is really nice, especially with a system like Quattro, which more or less starts life as a front-wheel drive based all-wheel drive system. Those are naturally a little more prone to understeer than a rear-wheel drive based system that you get in some other vehicles. And finally, one more thing that Audi has put on this particular SQ5 Sportback, which is a separate line item, and again, not necessarily the best explained on their Build Your Own tool, is dynamic steering. So what dynamic steering is more or less a variable ratio steering rack. So that means based on the drive mode you've got selected, the driving conditions you're experiencing, whether that's low speed, high speed, mid-corner, parking lot, kind of you name it, the car is monitoring what you're doing, and the steering rack can change the ratio it's using. So that means it takes more or less turns of the steering wheel to make the front wheels turn the same amount. So you can see where that might be helpful, for example, in a parking lot versus on a back road, a canyon road, that sort of thing. This particular SQ5 Sportback has that Sport S package, it has the dynamic steering package, it also has the Prestige package. So Audi offers several different trim levels. Prestige is kind of the top trim of this SQ5 Sportback, and you get all sorts of nice goodies. The ones I like in particular, the Bang & Olufsen sound system. You've got some really neat matrix LED headlights at the front, some LED taillights at the rear. We've got a 360-degree top-down camera view and a whole bunch of driver assistance technology, which, even though I love to drive, it's helpful to have in traffic jams, things like that. This also has the 21-inch black optics package, so you get some black accents all over the car, and then these 21-inch wheels with summer tires on them. And these are a 21-inch summer tire. It's a 255 section width Pirelli P0 summer tire, so quite a bit of tire for a car like this, and especially for something that weighs as much as it does. The SQ5 Sportback weighs a little over 4,300 pounds. According to Car and Driver, you get a 33-pound weight penalty for the SQ5 Sportback versus the regular SQ5. So if you get the more traditionally shaped SQ5, it weighs 33 pounds less than this one does. Regardless, Audi says this vehicle is good for a 4.7-second sprint from 0 to 60, which is honestly plenty for most drivers in most situations. Let's get behind the wheel and see how it is to drive. All right, so driving the 2021 Audi SQ5 Sportback. The first thing I want to talk about here is the drive modes. It's kind of odd to start off with that, but it does matter because Audi, like everyone else, is including a bunch of drive modes these days, and when you put it in the sportiest mode, which in this case is called dynamic, Audi pumps in a bunch of fake engine noise, which is not something that just Audi is doing. A lot of people do it in different ways, and in a lot of cases you can't turn it off, and it's pretty annoying, pretty egregious. And in this case, you can very obviously tell that it's not how this car should sound. It's a decent noise, but it sounds more like a V8 than anything to me. And the nice thing is there is an individual drive mode, and you can absolutely turn off the fake engine sound there. So this noise here is just what Audi can make out of the V6 and the turbocharger. I think this is plenty quick. It is not going to be a stoplight drag race sort of car. It doesn't feel like that. That's not how the power is delivered, but it is delivered in a way that makes kind of the middle of the tack feel really good. Kind of that 3,000 to 5,000 range. It feels really, really nice. And the indicated red line is about 6,500 RPM. It'll go there. It feels pretty good going there. It doesn't totally run out of power at the top of the revs, but it feels just nice and meaty kind of in the middle of the tack, and that's where you're going to have the most fun. Now, as far as the transmission programming is concerned, you do have drive and sport, and then you've got this manual mode. You can click the shifter over to the right, and the paddles will work in every case, but if you really want the car to listen to you, you need to put the shifter off to the right. There was a moment here where I thought that Audi was not letting me pick my own gears and hold them, and that it wasn't trusting me to know what I wanted in a certain situation, and that's not the case. You just have to know that this shifter, it's kind of one of those monostable shifters that just clicks forward and back a little bit, actually goes over to a second gate for manual mode. Now, in any case, the paddles are here, they work well, the shifts come fairly quickly, they feel pretty good. As far as handling is concerned, this is on the MLB Evo platform, which is shared with, among other things, the Porsche Macan. And that means you have to have a basic platform that can take a corner, because Porsche's got standards, as does Audi with these SQ and RS vehicles. They really want them to be really good to drive. So you can throw this through a corner, and it entry and exit both feel really good, really confidence inspiring, minimal body roll, and it's all quite good for the type of car this is. The dynamic steering, I don't know if I can tell you that I really notice that much of a dramatic effect. The steering to me feels a little bit light, but it does feel accurate enough. I've got a decent idea of where the front wheels are, so that is good. And ride quality is another thing. On these roads here, a lot of undulations, we're going, up and down, really testing the suspension for the sake of keeping the body controlled. And then around the city, you really just want something that rides nice on imperfect, poorly maintained roads. That's what a lot of people end up dealing with. And this suspension, this being part of the S Sport package on this adaptive air suspension, does feel pretty good everywhere. It's very well controlled, the body is controlled, and I think it's well damped. And so as far as everything else about the SQ5 Sportback beyond the chassis itself and how this thing drives in a performance-ish setting on back roads, it's just been a nice vehicle to spend time with. I really like the interior. The seats in particular are excellent. Really appreciate the pull-out thigh bolsters for those of us with longer legs. And It's kind of a German hallmark at this point, but Audi has done a nice job making sure that this cockpit is comfortable for someone who is on the taller end of things. I'm about 6'1". There are, of course, people taller than me, but I'm very comfortable here. Everything can come out to meet me and keep me in a comfortable spot. I also really like Audi's digital cockpit. It's something that I've had to get used to. It can be very overwhelming at first if you're presented with the screen and the gauges and then the screen over here. But once you get used to it, it is a pretty nice thing to have. And then otherwise, I think the sound system is pretty good. I think everything, you know, around me is pretty nice. I like the steering wheel. It's nice and minimalist with minimal buttons, but everything's easy to deal with, easy to comprehend and learn and you know, handle. The one thing that I don't love, and this is a personal preference thing, is I don't love the Sportback bit of the Sportback. and you may like it, you may hate it. On the plus side, I think this feels kind of like just a really big hot hatch, which is a really good thing. This is a fun car, and I wouldn't necessarily say fun for what it is. It's just fun, it's enjoyable. But the Sportback bit adds 33 pounds according to Car and Driver, and it takes away some practicality that I really wish I could have had this past weekend. I moved this past weekend, which was a wonderful process because I hired movers for the first time, but I still had to bring some boxes on my own. And the problem that we found with the SQ5 Sportback is that the excessively sloping rear of it really kind of hinders what you can fit in here for large items or how much you can stack if you're trying to stack boxes. You have to be very creative with how you load the back of this car. So if you're looking to have the most cargo space, you know, regardless of what people say for cubic inches and cubic feet for how things are in measured storage, you need to consider the shape of the storage space. And in my particular case, I would always go for the vehicle that is the more square in the rear if I'm buying a utility vehicle like a crossover. Now that being said, no vehicle is perfect. There are imperfections and things that could be different and personal preference things with every car. However, this is one that I truly, genuinely have looked forward to getting in and driving every time I've driven it over the last week. That is not something I can say about every single vehicle that I get the chance to drive. They are all interesting in their own ways. I think there are no truly bad cars on the market today. However, I have really looked forward to driving this every time I have driven it. All right, and that is it for this review of the 2021 Audi SQ5 Sportback. Thank you so much for coming along today. As always, please be sure to subscribe right here on YouTube and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a single thing coming up down the pike. We've got a lot coming where this came from. We'd love to have you join us. And of course, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Out Motorsports. And if you're looking to connect with other LGBT automotive enthusiasts and motorsports competitors, please head over to outmotorsports.com. We have a whole community over there, and we would love to have you join us. In the meantime, please stay safe, be well, and we'll see you again soon.